Hello, it's Dan, back to show you more about Novillo. I've done a half dozen of these videos now. It shocks me that I've joined this world. I'm a creator of an application which is under development, which is intended to make it easier to tell graphic visual stories in a new way. And today I'm going to do something a little different, a little more expansive than what I've done in the past. In the past, I've shown you the progress that I've made with the Novillo project's ability to kind of control the basic metaphor, which is you swipe the screen and things start to appear on the screen as the way of telling the story. I'm going to show you the progress we made in the last 24 hours, but I'm also going to take a deeper dive into the interface so you get a sense of what it's like to use Novillo. I'm actually going to start by, let me just see if I can do this here, getting the interface cleaned up and minimal. So I've hidden the timeline and I'm hiding the palette there. What you see now is the interface of Novillo at its most minimal when you're editing. There's just a little bar in the bottom, which we use for a few things we'll see later on, and a lozenge at the top, which is informative to tell you what you're doing right now. These are not going to be part of the reading experience. In the reading experience, it's a clear screen with just your images on it. But even in the editing experiences, we're trying to create an environment as free from encumbrance so you can just look at your work, decide what you like about it, and get forward on it. Now, so you can keep things very minimal if you want to. The bar at the bottom doesn't hide itself in edit mode yet. It will. We'll get to that. So while we're in this unobstructed view of the interface, let's see what the last 24 hours progress now leaves the swiping action doing. And let's get that rolling. So you can see me start to swipe here, and you can see there's two drawings in this particular composition, and they're starting to behave very differently. They are taking on different colors, and their line weights are changing at different rates and to different target values. That's the control we're looking for. This is the first point when we've had this sort of, you set the settings and it turns out to be just like that when you do the swiping. What a concept. But this puts us in a good situation for adding all the other attributes that we need to control. Opacity, line opacity, color of line, color of fill, background color. There's a bunch of them. And of course, most of all, Novillo will have this ability to draw lines on, and that will come, and we'll see a little bit of how that's done, but basically we're leaving that to once we got this other stuff solid. Okay, so here we are. Now that we have kind of a sense of what the last 24 hours progress have been, I wanted to show you something we've just gone by every other time, and it's this. This is what it's like to actually open up the Novillo project and from the starting screen. Now this starting screen is super minimal because we're just developing, but the basic idea is going to be the same in the finished version. A panel comes up and any of the projects you have are in a list there, you can select them. So we're taking a minute to look at the list there because the name of each project is composed of three components. The name that you give it, so mine include Turkey Monkey and others that you're great too, and then the name of the GitHub account from which all the information for that Novillo is pulled, and then the name of the repository within that account where the stuff is held. So Turkey Monkey Urbanistica SVG test, I think it is. That's the name of the project we've been working on, and I'm about to open it up. So now that we've got that, it gives you a clue. You need a GitHub account, you need a GitHub repository, but that's about it, and then you give it the name and start. So let's now take a look at this thing. We make the choice. It'll be a matter of pulling down that selector. It asks you to confirm, and then you're into the Urbanistica, I keep saying that, there's a reason, into the Novillo project that you're interested in editing or reading. The reading process will be quite similar. Okay, so projects have a name and their creator gives it, and this is the actual start screen. We've seen that. Now let's see if we can move forward here. I wanted to explain the Novillo interface, and now we're in, so we can do that. So let's start with the bar at the bottom, and we're looking at the existing composition that we've been demoing over and over again. And let's take a look at what happens when you start to interact with that little bit of the bar that's there that is the only thing. So what we just did is we clicked on that number between the two arrows, and we can enter an endpoint along the storyline that says where we want to start viewing this composition form. So now we've jumped to frame 0. I'm going ahead and I'm swiping. You can see it proceeds normally. It's doing what it was doing before. So that's our process of jumping in and allowing ourselves to, choose where we want to begin. We can do that with other points as well. So at various times when you're editing, you may want to jump in and see what does it look like at in point 30 or 80 or 250. And so in this case, what you can see is we're about to do the same thing, but with a different number. We're going to jump in at frame 20. And when it jumps in at frame 20, here we go, you'll see that the composition is rendered differently. It reflects the stages at 20 points in. Now again at 100, and it's further along the rendering process. So you can see now that we have full control over that in point, and it's a tool that you'll use as an editor of Novillo a lot because you want to see just where things are changing and at what rate, because things can change at different rates. Okay, so we hit that pellet earlier on in the video, so let's bring that back now. It's hiding up in the upper left corner, and if it's not visible, it's there. And you can put this palette anywhere you want on the screen, so it can be out of the way of the stuff you're trying to do. Now let's do the next thing, which is take a look at what's in that palette. The palette has 4 modes. You may have seen me use these in the other demos, but they are basically text mode, media mode, or image mode, block mode, and composition mode. When you first start up, you're in block mode, but I moved us into composition mode so we could see this thing. But now let's take a look at one of the other modes, which is media mode. So media mode shows a list in the palette of all of the individual images that are part of your GitHub repository that you've pulled in or have been pulled in for you that you can work with in your Novillo. So that happens right there. And when you first start up Novillo, Novillo goes to your GitHub repository, checks to see if anything's changed, and tells you if it has, and if it has, you have the option of updating those things. So this is always an up-to-date list unless you don't want it to be. Now, if we go ahead and we were to, for example, start selecting the different items in this list, we can get previews at near full size of each of the drawings that will go into the Novillo. Now there's a convention that we use square drawings in Novillo. And the reason is because your screen can rotate and you can potentially look at the same thing in either horizontal or vertical format. And so we set the format that the images are square so they'll max out to the maximum current dimension. And so sometimes in your horizontal mode, some of the top will be missing, some of the bottom will be missing in vertical mode. But we're going to have a little tool to let you see what is there. In the meantime, these are the different items that are existing in the media list, and we can use those in different ways. Now, there's also a text mode in Novillo. We haven't started to develop this at all, but just take a quick look at it. You can see that it does sort of a similar thing. It has one item in it, which is an HTML file. And that's in your repository as well. And we just cause it to display up in the preview there so you can see what it's like. The red area on the right-hand side is where CSS files will be listed. So you can associate a CSS file with a text file, or an HTML file. And that can be, that'll affect the styling of your text on the screen when you composite the text in with the rest of your image stuff. So that's coming. It's the text mode, but we don't really use it in any of these demos because it has a different set of problems. Okay, time to go back to the block mode where we first started off. So if we go back there, we'll see the screen has now got nothing in it. And we have a listing of 4 items. Each of these are blocks. And you'll recognize that what's shown in the blocks are the media that we looked at when we were in the media pane. So it just happens that we put one image into each one of these 4 blocks. No particular reason you have to do it that way. We'll take a look in a second and show you how that can be different. But you can add media very quickly to any block, and I'll show you how that works. What we'll do here is we'll take a look at this is the media we're going to add. Now we're going to go to the blocks mode, and so we've selected that. We've already selected an active block, and we hit the add media button, and now you can see that where there was just the figure standing, we now have 2 items, and those will both appear when we pull that block into a composition, which we'll look at next. Now just a note, the orange rendering is not the way it will be, but it's something I'm doing for debugging purposes just to tell which version of something is showing. But in the finished version, and most of the time when I'm working on it, it's a linear drawing so you can see what the pieces are. Okay, so that's how you add media to a block, and that's a crucial thing. The blocks are basically like folders except for one thing. One piece of media, one image can be in multiple blocks at the same time. So you can pull in 2 blocks out of the same image and it will appear twice. That's the way it works. There's advantages, and it makes some things a bit complicated, but we're trying to make the interface simple for that. Okay, so that's our main organizing tool, the block. Compositions are where the action really is, though. Compositions are where what we see on the screen is put together and affected. So I'm going to skip the process of adding a block to a comp or a composition, because it works the same way. You select the composition you want to add the block to, you go back and choose the block, and hit add to composition, and it's in there. But in the meantime, when we do this next thing, keep an eye on the palette, because you're going to see that as I move through the different compositions, you'll see that there's a set of tables, and they include all the blocks that are in each one of those compositions. Below that, all of the images that are in the blocks all together, and then the groups that are in each one of the images, which is another story which we'll talk about later. So we've been through all 3, and we can see that they're all composed of different groups, and the one that's currently on the screen right now has a block with 3 items, or has 2 blocks, one of which has 2 drawings in it, the other one has 1 drawing in it. So we're getting 3 drawings in there. You can composite things together very effectively this way, and then use this little table set in the palette to determine exactly what you want to make changes to. So that's the idea here. It becomes clear when we start doing more detailed dives into the selection and editing process. But for now, you know it's there. Okay, so let's go back to the composition that we've been looking at for all the demos so far and take a look at a little bit more about how we actually get into the process of editing. Because right now we're in selection mode. We're determining what we want to work on. Now, you'll recognize this, you'll recognize the palette. And what we're going to do is we're going to, at this point, open up that composition, our first composition. You'll see that there are 7 items below it. Each one of those is an event. So along the storyline, the amount of time or amount of swiping it takes to get through that composition, there are 7 distinct points along that line that at different points change values associated with some or all of the elements in that composition. So that's a visualization for how to get to the various things that are changing values. That's not actually hooked up right now, but we have another way to do it, which I'll show you in a second. So let's move forward and look at how we can navigate into the different editing modes or editing opportunities. So what I've just popped up here at the bottom is the other way to do it. On the left-hand side, what you're seeing is the list of names of threads. Now, I'm going to take a moment here to define what a thread is. A thread is a set of selections. In other words, like I've selected this block and this image inside that block, and maybe this group inside that image. That unique combination forms a selection that is linked to all the other things that are selected in the same way. So if I select that combination at frame 0, it'll link to that same combination selected at frame 28. And that's called a thread. Along this thread are events. So there's kind of like a cross going on here. And this little selector at the bottom allows you to get in a given thread to a given event, and then you can start to edit. So sorry that was a bit confusing, and it's actually meant to be more intuitive to use and to explain, and we'll be doing some more editing videos as this thing matures, but you get the idea. Okay, so now I've selected a thread and an event in that thread, and that's going to allow me to edit to enter into the editing controls. Right now we're just in the selection controls, and just one more thing. You'll notice that in the palette, there's a combination of selected items. These are the selections that correspond to our currently selected thread, just so it's visual and tangible for you. Okay, so now what are we going to do next? What we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, that's what we want to, and then we're going to swipe. It takes a minute for me to do this. Something like wonky, but here we go. So I've swiped, and what this does is it brings me into the edit mode. I can only get into the edit mode if I'm editing in with a valid thread selected and a valid event selected. If I tried to do it, I wouldn't be able to, but there's an edit button and I can create either the thread or the event as required. But now we can see where the actual changing of values inside of Novillo happens. We're only going to get as far in this, a little further in this, which is to show you what's in here, and only in very general terms. But let's do that now. So in the editing section, there are basically 4 categories, and they are the green buttons that are running along the top. And so let me just sort of go through those one by one, okay? So in the first case, there's line weight and values associated with that. Then there's opacity and background color. There's fill for any objects that are filled. And then at the very end of it, there's the line draw function. One of the things that's missing in this palette right now is the color picker that sits right below the little paintbrush, which allows you to select colors. But that's just been removed temporarily. This is still a work in progress. I'm going to make another video to show you how you actually use this editing process, but this editing palette is meant to be very minimal. It takes up a small area on the screen, and it gives you full flexibility to do all kinds of powerful things that allow you to manage all the crucial values that, that Novillo allows you to manage to create that kind of characterful way of drawing things on, dissolving things on, and so forth, that Novillo has as its goal and its sort of its characteristic. So that's a lot, and I wanted to kind of just get this video done so there's some reference, and I'll probably do a better, clearer one when I have it better and clearer in my head. But it's a pretty good and comprehensive introduction, and one of the things I want to get across is that this is a very minimal app. This is built to be worked on with very little in the way of interface and very much looking at the work you're doing and shaping it to be what you want it to do. Okay, that's a lot. Thank you very much for watching. A long one today. I hope this turns out to be as good as I practice to make it. But if you are watching and you come across this, let me know. Novillo is on its way. Once we get this thing up and out, I'll be delighted to get people onto the beta list. So let me know if you'd like to be a beta tester. And then it's going to be an app. And at that point, I'm really going to be delighted to see what people build with it. But even before that, I'll be starting to build my own stories with it so you can get a sense of it. And that's coming too. May as well talk a lot because it's a long video. Okay, thanks a lot. Dan Novillo. Next time.